Okay, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for your patience. Welcome back to the second day of Sidoti's March conference. My name is Daniel Harriman. I'm an analyst here at Sidoti. This afternoon, we're going to hear from Almonty Industries. That's ticker AII. We're lucky enough to have the company's president and CEO, Louis Black, for the presentation today. We're going to give him about 20 minutes to go through his presentation and slide deck, after which time I'm going to open it up for a 10-minute Q&A. If you do have any questions at any time during the presentation, please feel free to type those into the Q&A box, and time permitting, we will get to as many as we can. With that, please join me in welcoming Louis Black and Almonty. And with that, Louis, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you very much. Firstly, I want to apologize. This is a technical fix, last minute. My camera gave up the ghost on the computer, so I'm on an iPad. So bear with me if I'm not as naturally wonderful as normal. So my name is Louis Black. I am the president, CEO, and founder of Almonty Industries, and we are the backbone of tungsten outside of China, Russia, and North Korea. I'm hoping you can see my investor presentation. Just to give you a little background on us. Well, we've been doing this a long time. This is the only thing we do. We are a critical metal that is utilized in essentially every facet of any part of anyone's economy. This is running from technical to industrial. And it's very important to bear in mind that makes it quite unique. I mean, there are strategic metals, but none have the kind of coverage that we have. As a company, we've obviously seen a significant rise in our share price recently. This is because of the export ban placed upon tungsten by China. And that's brought us very much to the attention, because if you Google tungsten and Google, Western tungsten, we're who pops up. As I said, we've been doing this a long time. We have an unusual situation in regard to shareholders. I am quite extraordinarily, as a junior mining manager, the second largest shareholder. I've deployed millions of dollars of my own money into this. This is because I've done this before in tungsten, where we've taken a great asset, we've turned it around, and we've exited for 21 times earnings. We have resisted the call of larger institutions, PE funds and hedge funds, to be our smart money. We've always remained independent. This has allowed us to remain nimble. And as everything that we do at Almonty is slightly unusual in our approach, it has proven to be very successful. And a case in point is that our IPO was done, 12, 13 years ago. And the shareholders that we took on then are not only still with us, but they're all in the money, which of course for a junior miner is unheard of, because normally after a decade or so, you've gone through 3 or 4 sets of shareholders. So I take great pride in the fact that I'm first and foremost a shareholder. So what's going on in tungsten? Well, there's a lot going on. And this is uncharted waters. There's always been a kind of understanding between the players in our sector that tungsten diplomacy remain in place. And the reason why this was important was that it's a scarce metal. There's a scarcity value. 90% of it comes from North Korea, China, and Russia. It's not like we have a plethora of mines in the West. We used to have almost 100 in the 70s, but then China arrived in the 80s with very cheap material. This is a classic story. We've seen it before on multiple metals. And by the mid-90s, there were 2 tungsten mines left. And a lot of those deposits that were closed were either close to depletion, they are in areas that you cannot access any longer. And most importantly, and this is going to sound a little unusual, but in fact is completely true, is that tungsten is a particularly difficult metal to process. It's very brittle. It has the same density as gold, but it's a very brittle metal to process. And that knowledge, that know-how, with these mines closed in the West 30 odd years ago, is gone. we were one of the few mines that survived that. And for us to be able to compete with China, with what was going on through the 2000s and 2010s, was we couldn't do it with price. We couldn't do it with government subsidies because we didn't receive any. And that was what our competition was Chinese government subsidies. We did it by developing a series of technologies that were specific to tungsten that has enabled us to not only survive, but be, unfortunately, the only tungsten mine, say in Portugal, in operation that actually makes money. And the only reason we took on a project that we're going to talk about in a little bit that's going to open shortly, the world's biggest tungsten mine, was because of our experience and knowledge contained within Portugal. Within the sector itself, we have a number of factors at play. I think we can put everything to one side and talk about just one area, because that, I think, is the most relevant for all countries right now. It's quite unique. Obviously, tungsten's used in aerospace and semiconductors and automotive, all very important sectors. But defense is now the big cornerstone problem that we face. If you feel that 90% of the tungsten comes from three nations, somebody that we work with is a penetrator manufacturer in Pennsylvania, and they said to me, it's showing me a 50 cal penetrator and the inside mechanism of it, saying that the absurdity is that they send them to the Ukraine to defend themselves against the three nations that provided 90% of the raw materials for this penetrator. He said, it's such a mess of a situation. What are we going to do? And I think that's something which we have to really now consider. As I said, it's uncharted waters. We have almost a total alignment of all Western countries regarding defense. And tungsten is the primary metal for all hardware. That's all munitions and armor. Of course, you use it in the manufacture of tanks and planes and guidance systems and braking systems. But if you just look at it in total isolation of what the main consumers are in defense, it is for munitions and for armor. And without tungsten, you cannot do either. Of course, we haven't made it easy for ourselves. We've also put up various barriers as to where we can get this tungsten from. So, for instance, in January 1, 2027, you've got the DoD is saying that from that point onwards, you cannot supply the United States government with tungsten that comes from Iran, North Korea, China, or Russia, which essentially means us. And again, that's an unusual situation that we find ourselves in. So, what do we have? Well, we have our Portuguese project in Panasqueira. It's been going 136 years. She's got some age under her. Her grade is not what it used to be, but we still make money. And I always say, as a shareholder, if we can make money with an underground old mine in Portugal with this grade, what can we do with a brand new high-grade mine that we're just finishing construction of in Korea? So I think that's, from a purely earnings and generation of revenue scenario, it's an important distinction. We've got two other sites in Spain. One is a tailings project that as soon as I've opened Korea in 2 to 3 months' time, I will turn my attention to that. And then we have another one for permitting in Spain in Valtreixal. But both are, our Portuguese and our Spanish assets, albeit good projects, they lack the size and the impact of Korea. The Korean project was formerly the world's largest tungsten mine. It's a brownfields, it's well defined, it has a 90 plus years of reserves. It runs at roughly 3 to 3.5 times the grade of any other tungsten mine, the average of any tungsten mine globally. And so I think it's important to note that mine can make the real difference of what's going on geopolitically. Portugal is basically, as I said, it's in production, it makes money, and it contains the knowledge that I've always needed to develop something like Sangdong. So why come into us? Well, we've recently done a special shareholders meeting, and it was almost unanimously supported for us to redomicile from Canada into the US. This would make us the only US company that produces tungsten, which is, as I said, the primary metal for all hardware for the defense sector. We make money. We have all of our funding, for instance, in Korea, all came from KfW IPEX, which is obviously the world's #1 tier one project finance lender. So it's cheap money from a development bank. It meant that we went through a high level of scrutiny to be able to be awarded that funding. And we have a proven track record. We've done this before. We've taken, well, actually, it was the Portuguese mine. We turned it around. We sold it for 21 times earnings. The new owners struggled with understanding how to run that mine, even though I left them a little book saying, if you follow this mine will work for you every day. They sold it back to me for, well, $1. And from the first month I owned it, it started making money again. We also have what I consider as a shareholder to be very important. We have near-term growth. And I'm not just talking about opening in 2 or 3 months in Korea. Yeah, that's the easy part. That's what I call phase one. Phase two is in fact a doubling of outputs at the Korean site. And most of the work for that has already been done under phase one. So within 12 months of me opening phase one, phase two will open. So then I'll be essentially from X of revenue to 2X. I also have a fully permitted, both environmental and a mining permit project in Moly that's 300 feet from my existing infrastructure in Korea at the tungsten mine. And I've made, we'll talk about that shortly, an offtake to supply that to the world's second largest moly oxide smelter, which in fact finds its material to their SpaceX, to their factory in Texas, which ultimately ends up with SpaceX and with the US defense industry. And I think we have certain things that the industry has afforded us that also should give people great confidence in us. Firstly, we get a premium for our product out of Portugal. No one else gets a premium. We don't get a premium because we're lovely people, which that may actually be true, but the real reason is we produce a particularly good, high-grade product that is reliably supplied over many years and is coveted by all of my customers. And it's important to note that price is not the driver in tungsten, because you use so little of it in the end process. It doesn't affect margin. It's availability. We also achieve our milestones. I mean, the amount of times I've heard that we'll never be able to do something, and then we do it. It's because everything we've done, as I said right at the beginning, we've never done anything as the traditional junior miner. We've never aligned ourselves with a banking organization or a Sprott or a Parler or an Orion, a royalty, a royalty fund. We've done things with independence. We financed this internally through friends of the family. We're tightly held in that regard. We have always demonstrated our reliability to our industry, and that's afforded, again, certain benefits, not just premiums. We have offtakes with hard floors. Hard floors and no cap on the upside. So it means that if China does what they've done to lithium and rare earths recently, it doesn't affect us. We still survive. We still are able to meet our obligations and afford a decent steak dinner once a week. So it's not ideal, but at least that's a safety net. Again, I make decisions as CEO, as a shareholder, first and foremost. If when the time comes, shareholders say, you know what, we're sick of Lewis, we can do better, I'm fully supportive. If I see a way of increasing value that doesn't involve me, I'm all for it. But in the interim, my decisions are based on what shareholders, in fact, expect. So what's going to happen going forward? Well, as I said, no one really knows. It's uncharted. We have an export ban in place from February 4th of this year. This is linked to dual use export permits. Of course, unfortunately, because tungsten is so relevant in defense, it pretty much excludes all of our customers. So we're unsure how that's going to be dealt with. We have, as I said, the offtakes with Sayar and, of course, with one of the largest companies in Austria for our tungsten. We have our hard floor contracts with only AAA rated companies. You're not some guy we meet down the bar. It's got to have some meaning that if it turns against us, it's done. We have absolutely no issues raising money if and when we need it, because we have a great deal of support internally. And we are intending to relocate to the States, as well as the fact that we are looking at further integration into the defense space. And this is not just something we've dreamt up. I didn't just decide one day, this is what we're going to do. We've always been a primary supplier to the car sector and to the aerospace sector. It was a good, solid, reliable space. But over the last 24 months, we found ourselves increasingly drawn into the defense space. Whether we like it or not, that is the reality that we face, because when it comes down to defense, governments will always prioritize that. And we have multiple conversations where people have come to us and said, look, we need to fill this space, we need to fill that personnel. And so we're starting to put together a team at our end to really look at how we integrate into the defense space in the United States, because we have something that no one else has, which is we have enough material in phase 2 that could quite easily accommodate the entire tungsten requirements for the US defense sector, which is, of course, unique, coming from an allied country in South Korea. And I'm sure that some people watching this have tried to navigate through the United States government. And even though my accent gives me away, I'm actually an American. But it was much better to bring in professionals like ADI to guide us. But there's going to be more announcements on the back of that, of how we're sort of retooling how we work and what we intend to do. So tungsten price is good. It's held its own really since 21. It's continuing to increase like antimony now because of these export controls. And it's on top of everyone's list throughout the Western world, whether it be the EU, the US. I mean, that's another question. We've operated in Europe for many years, but we're also getting some pressure from Europe to think about their defense needs. So we're really kind of caught between a rock and a hard place sometimes. And we have to be very careful how we approach this, because you don't want to upset anybody. We also, on this slide, you can see we are looking with the Korean government to do a downstream tungsten project, a plant, a tungsten oxide plant. That'll predominantly be for domestic consumption, because 97% of the tungsten oxide currently consumed in Korea comes from China. So that's also another part of our internal growth. But this is going to be much more of a governmental approach with the South Korean government. I think I've pretty much covered a lot of this with the geopolitical tensions. Obviously, moly, again, is another backbone product for defense. They use it in the specialty steel for the rockets, for the shielding in the cones, not just in rockets, but missiles as well. And I think, again, the deal that we've made, what we understand from SAR is our material will find its way to their plant they're building in Texas, which in turn goes to the US missile defense space and also to SpaceX. In terms of Sangdong, it's a big project. It's unlike anything else that exists on the planet. I mean, I can say that with great sincerity. There's a reason why multiple governments have backed us: the German government, the Austrian government, the South Korean government, because there's nothing else even close to this. I mean, we're looking at phase 1 and phase 2, but theoretically, it's possible to do phase 3 and phase 4 because you have more than enough reserves, which technically could provide the whole of the US with all of their tungsten requirements, which of course is an absurd idea, but it is theoretically possible. This mine in its day accounted for 30% of GDP in South Korea. It has a mythical status in the country. And like our Portuguese project, it will run for more than 100 years. It's a very, very special place. This is an older picture, I do apologize, but this shows the scale of what is currently nearing completion now. This is a big, big project that has already had built into it phase 2. And that's an important moment that we've been planning for expansion, even when we were planning for opening. So we've really built it in right from the beginning. And this gives you an idea of the kind of, I mean, we're building on the side of a mountain. So we had the Olympics around the corner not that long ago in South Korea. So it gives you an idea that we're in a beautiful part of the world, but we have limited space. So we've had to be, from an engineering point of view, very creative in our approach. As we said, it's a vast resource, and it will be easily comparable to our Portuguese project in terms of longevity. And we have, as I said, multiple banks involved. We have real actors in this space. As I said, no one else has floor prices as we do. No one else has premiums. KfW have never backed a tungsten project before in their history, and I doubt whether they'll do it again. It's something quite unique. If this project had not been what it was meant to be, it would never have been. So Dan is back. So I assume we're coming to question time.
Yeah, we are. Thank you so much,
Oh, it's okay.
Lewis. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the box. Lewis, we've had a couple good ones come in so far. One is a kind of a two-part question, but what does it look like over the next 3 to 5 years? Do you have a plan to potentially sell the company? And then if so, what type of company would be, really interested in purchasing you? Would it be a for-profit or a government entity? And then, for investors that are new to the story, how is it best to value kind of a long-lived asset like some of these mines?
Well, if I answer the second part first, is that who would be interested in this? Well, I think any strategic consumer, because of course, just if you want to compete for US defense work after 2020, after the end of 2026, you're going to need a transparent source of tungsten. So just on that factor, and when we sold before, we sold to a strategic consumer. So this would give them complete diversity from China, Russia, and North Korea, which is a very important factor. How do you value it? Well, we've been the only people who have sold an active tungsten mine in the last 20 years. So we probably have quite a bit of experience in valuation. We came up with a valuation last time of 21 times earnings. And the reason why that earnings multiple is higher than you would expect in a traditional metal or base metal, for instance, is because it's a strategic metal, so it defies that kind of normal metric. You use very little of it, so the price is not of such relevance, and its scarcity is also a factor. So in terms of valuation, I think the market will determine it, but I think if we look at the mountain passes and the Linuses, there is a strategic valuation applied to strategic metals. In terms of what's my intention next 5 years? Well, we have phase 2 to do. We have the moly mine to build, to open, and we have the tungsten oxide. This is really the next 5 years outlook. In that journey, do I expect someone to come along and suggest it's better in their hands? All I can say is I'm a shareholder first and foremost. This is not being done for the benefit of my legacy. I'm not looking for a statue. I'm looking for a return. And so if a sensible conversation happens, yes, of course, I would entertain it. This is not, has this taken longer than I would have liked? Yes, but I had to find the right financing. And no one in tungsten had done that before. So everything took time. And, building in a democracy. Remember, I bought Korea in 2015. We've been at this for 10 years to open. That's the normal. 8 to 10 years is the normal in a democracy, but it's not for the faint-hearted. So, but to answer your question, if someone knocks on the door and I can see a value add for myself and all shareholders, then of course I'll always entertain that.
Perfect. And then you talked a little bit about the, government defense. You've mentioned that you're particularly interested in the U.S. defense system, but a question has come in, are you open to all government defense programs? And is your interest maybe in the U.S. defense system, driven by your decision to relocate and redomicile into the U.S.?
Well, when you say all governments, I assume you don't mean governments like North Korea or something. So
Correct. That's correct. That's correct.
We probably probably take the call just to hear what threat they were going to level at me, but that would just be completely just for my own entertainment. We're moving into the US because I think we're going to get a better tax advantage, and I think we're going to get a lot more. We are getting a lot more support. I mean, I'm an American. A lot of my major shareholders are American. 85% of my material already goes into the US. It's a natural home for us. And to be honest, I've been able to build this company because of America. I mean, I was able to access capital all those years ago. America's been good to me. It makes sense to onshore it now. But if you get a call from an allied nation, of course you take the call because you can't make everybody happy. And it's not my decision to decide who gets what. But at the same time, I take guidance from my American colleagues, and ultimately, the EU. We're going to try and accommodate the EU from our Portuguese assets because we have enough in Korea to satisfy the US, and we have enough in Portugal to make a really big dent in what, say, Germany will need. So we're trying to do the right thing by everybody. But I am focusing now almost exclusively on the defense space because I think this is the space that is the most relevant in the short term. In the short term.
Perfect. I think you had a slide on this, but what does your timeline look like for the, redomiciling into the US?
Well, we've got the green light, so I would imagine it'll be happening probably during the summer.
Okay.
We can do it any time. Now it's just a question of pushing paper. We have all the sign-offs, everything's done. It's just now the last push of paper. I've got 1,000 things I'm doing. I'm going to do it, but it will be during this year. We'll be a proud American corporation, a LLC.
Perfect. Perfect. Switching gears a little bit, you talked about royalties from Portugal. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? And would you expect to receive royalties from your operations in South Korea and Spain as well?
Well, we don't pay any royalties. So when I was talking about it was in terms of how you would normally fund a mine. Some people go to royalty lenders. What are they? There's a word for them. I can't remember. No, that's a bad word. But the other word, streamers. Streaming deal. So we've never engaged with that. We don't pay royalties in Korea to the government. Well, we pay a small royalty in Portugal, and that was really when the people who bought it from me the first time, they then made this deal with the government because the government then said, we want royalties, and they agreed to it. I, of course, would not have agreed to it at all. And that's why they asked the new owners, not me. So when I got it back, the mines department took me for dinner because they knew they did a bit of a good shakedown. But yes, it's a small royalty, so it's not a big
Okay.
issue.
Okay, perfect. Well, we're hitting up on time. So Lewis, I'll just hand it back to you if you have any closing thoughts that you want to share with investors who may be new to the story.
I think the most important thing is to know that I'm a manager who's deployed millions of dollars of my own money. I'm the second largest shareholder, and my decisions are made as a shareholder. I also believe in what we're doing. I believe defense is important. I think we have as a company an opportunity to provide a solution without needing money. We don't want to ask anybody for anything. We have the luxury of being able to say we can do this, and that's why if you notice the announcements that have come out and will continue to come out, we are building up this team. At other people's suggestion to really be able to integrate into finding that I'm providing that solution. So I think as an investor, I would say that we have a strong, a strong conviction to what we're doing. It's not just about trying to be a professional manager. It's about being a bloody good shareholder. And that's what I consider myself.
Perfect. Well, Lewis, on behalf of Sidoti and everybody in the audience, thank you so much for being here today and sharing Almonty's story. For those of you who participated, thank you so much for your questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. But again, Lewis, thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to following your story in the time to come.